In this section of our custom theme development course, we will be working on creating templates. As you know, template files are central to theme structure. They control the various pages and page types within WordPress. By making different templates, you'll be able to structure pages in a different way. We'll be working on creating a variety of templates so we can really dial in our website. The current website that we've been using all are using the exact same template file. And as you can see, if I visit any of my pages, depending on what content exists on those pages, we will see different text, but for the most part, the content is the same. We also have some things that we don't want, such as this text right here. We'll want to dial this in so we can control this on a very specific level. If you recall, we have not created any sort of template files. So the only template that exists is the index template. This is the default template, which is necessary for all WordPress websites to function correctly. This is the fallback template for any type of content. So when we have no other template, all pages rely on the index.html template. Not only is this template required, but if there's no other template that matches the request, WordPress has to use this. We haven't done much on this template. It currently contains our header and our footer, and then as a demonstration, I just put in this heading that says check out my custom theme. I will delete that as that's not necessary. Inside of the grouped area, there currently is a query loop. This is what's bringing in our post templates. This also contains a group with pagination. So depending on what you've set for your default number of posts that you want to display, you may need pagination at the bottom of your page. Here's an example of what the pagination looks like. So what I'm going to do to begin with is I'm going to modify this content. I want to be able to change what this says. So inside this group, we're going to go ahead and we're going to begin by creating a cover image. So I'm going to say add after, and we'll go ahead and just type cover, and I'll drag this cover into the group. And then we're going to say use featured image. And for the title, we're just going to bring in the page title. So I'm just going to use the title element right here. I'll center this. And I'm going to set this to be an H1. And let's change the text color to be white. So I'll go to my styles and I'll set the text color to be just a pure white. Now that I have this here, if we save our page and we go back to the front end portion of WordPress and refresh, you're going to see that there's a placeholder for our featured image. Currently, I don't have a featured image on any of my pages, so it's just going to show with our text and this box. Now, ideally, I don't want the box to be restricted by the content width, which is what's happening with this group right here. This group is using the default content width that we specified on our website. We can easily adjust this by pulling the cover out and putting it outside of the query loop. And while I have this group selected, I'm just going to go into styles and I'm going to make sure that my margin and padding on the top are set to none. So I'll reduce those things down. With the cover selected, I'm going to go into styles and we'll just make sure that the margin on the top and the bottom and the padding on the top and the bottom are set to none. And with this cover image selected, I'll go to my regular settings. I'm going to go to advanced, and we're going to give this a class of hero wrap. This will allow us to hook this using custom CSS. In addition to the title, I'm going to add another element. We're going to use a separator. I'll go to my background and let's just select one of the colors from our color palette. I'm going to use green. And then after the separator, I'm going to insert my site tagline. And I will center this and let's select this text. I'll go to color. I'm going to make this text appear as our light gray. And I'm going to increase the size of the text a little bit by using our medium font size. Let's go to typography. We'll go to the three dots and open appearance. We'll set this to extra light, and let's go ahead and save this. And in order for us to really see what's going on, I'm going to go back to WordPress. I'll go into my pages, and I'm just going to set some featured images. So I'll go ahead to my About page. I'm going to select featured image. I have a variety of images. Some of my images have more of a landscape orientation, so I'm going to be sure to choose those. I'll save this page, and I'll go ahead and just add some featured images to my additional pages as well. Now that I have some featured images, if we go back to the front end and we refresh, you can see that this is what our page currently looks like. So any page where I've set a featured image is going to display in this way. Now, some of my pages, such as recipe, I did not set a featured image yet, so you can see nothing shows up. However, if we go to the blog page, this does show up. As you can see, when I'm on my home image, our featured image is not showing up. If we go back to WordPress, you can see I do have a featured image on my home page. This may not be displaying because I am currently using my home page as the default blog page. Now, by default, all of my pages are using the index template, but let's go ahead and let's change the static page to our home page. And then for our post page, we're not going to select a specific post page. We'll be making our own post pages. I'll click Save Changes. And if we go back and we refresh, you can now see that that hero image does show up. This is a little odd that it doesn't show up until we actually set this as a static page, but it does have to do with how WordPress works. And even though we only have the index page, for whatever reason, WordPress, when you have your homepage just set as the default blog page, it does not use the index page. Now that we have that worked out, we're going to go ahead and we're going to add some custom CSS to our hero image. The first thing that I want to do is I don't want the overlay to be so light. I want this to be a little bit darker, which will help my text to pop a little bit. And the other thing that I want to do is I want to have my image slide behind my navigation. If you recall, when we built the navigation, we used a background color that was not completely opaque. I would like to show a little bit of my image behind the navigation. I'll go back into my template. I'm going to select my cover image. And if we go to styles, this is where you can control the overlay. So I'm going to go to overlay. I'll be using a gradient, and I'm going to use a gradient that goes from black to black. So I'm going to select black for both colors. But on this second shade of black, I'm going to set the opacity to maybe 50-ish%. So I'll just drag this into the middle. Then I'm going to change the degrees to be at 180 degrees. So my gradient is going to be dark at the top and then fade to a lighter color. Because we don't have the image here, it's a little bit difficult to see this, but if we save our page and jump back into the front end and refresh, you're going to see that we have something like this. You might need to go back and forth a little bit just to dial this in. So I'm going to make my gradient slightly darker overall by using an opacity of 70%. If we come back and we refresh, you can see that it's a little bit darker at the top, and then it kind of fades out to being a lighter shade of overlay on top of my image. This does help my text to pop a little bit more, which is what I want. In order to get the hero image to slide behind the navigation, we're going to need to use some custom CSS. I'll open my developer tools, and if we look at this cover image, you can see that here is our custom class of hero wrap. And it also is worth mentioning that the navigation itself, which is located inside this header, has a class of menu wrap. We have placed that on there in a previous video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these as hooks. Let's jump into our code files. I'm going to add these into my style.css. I'll go ahead and place these rules underneath my navigation, but before my footer, I'll hit some returns right here. I'll make a comment for hero image, and I'll use a class of .hero wrap. I'm going to have the hero image have a position of absolute. We're going to set the top to 0, and our Z index will also be set to 0 for the hero wrap. I'll also need to add a width of 100%. If we save and go back to the front end portion of our website and refresh, you're going to see that the image does slide to the top of the page. Now, currently, because this is the only element that has position, it is appearing in front, which we do not want. So let's go back into our custom CSS. And in addition to making this rule, I'm also going to add a rule for my menu wrap. Let's go ahead and use .menu wrap. So I just realized that I had placed these rules inside of my media query. We have this media query right here, which is controlling some of our things. So I want these rules to be outside of the media query. I need to make sure that I move them so they're not part of my media query. That will not allow my page to function in the way that I want. We're going to add a position of relative to the menu item, and we'll go ahead and give this a z-index that's just higher than 0. It really could be any number that's higher than 0. I'm going to use 20. Let's save our page now. And if we come back into the front end and refresh, you should see that our menu does appear, and we can see the image appearing underneath it. So this is looking a little bit better. Obviously, this picture is somewhat problematic, and the fact that our text is slipping underneath the menu is also problematic. What you're going to want to do is you want to find out how tall your menu is. So I know that my menu is roughly 180 pixels. I'm just going to round it up to 200. So what I want to do is I want to create some spacing, padding anyways, within this cover image to push this down. The other thing that I'm going to do, and I'm going to do this in the template, is I'm going to make my hero image have a overall height of 50 vertical height. So let's go back to WordPress with this selected. I'm going to go into minimum height. We'll change this to VH for vertical height, and I want this to be 50. The other thing that I'm going to do is inside the cover, most of my text is pretty small, but I'm going to group these things together. So I'm going to select my tagline, separator, and title, and I'll just create a group. With the group selected, I'm going to set my content width to 800 pixels. This will just ensure that this text doesn't get overly wide, which is what I want. We'll save that. And then let's go back to our custom code. And we're going to want to add on the hero wrap a padding on the top of 200 pixels. And I'm pretty sure that this needs to have the important modifier because I think that this particular element uses some inline padding. So I'm going to add important. And if we save now and go back to WordPress to the front end and refresh, you can see that this looks a little bit better. And then we have this issue with the rest of our content. So keep in mind that when something is absolute, other elements can appear on top of it. Typically, this doesn't happen unless these elements have some sort of position on them as well. But WordPress does use position on a lot of elements. So if we actually select our main item, which has this WP block group, if we look down here, these elements also have position of relative. So that's why this is slipping up. In order to resolve that, I'm going to go into my template. We'll select this group right here, which contains all of the page related content. And we're going to open our styles. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change my margin. I'm going to unlink this so I can just target margin on the top, and I'm going to set a custom size. I'll use VH, and I don't think this quite has to be 50 because we're pulling the hero image up by 200 pixels. It probably is going to be closer to like 30 or 35, so I'll try 35. Let's save this. And now if we refresh our page, you can see that the content looks much better. You'll want to play around and just make sure that this still works at the various screen sizes. So 35 maybe is a little big. Let's try 30. I'll save this one more time. And if we refresh, that just snugs this content up. And I think that looks much better. And then the final thing that I want to do is I'm going to create a little bit of a drop shadow underneath my navigation just to separate this from the image. Again, I'm going to do that in my custom CSS. We'll jump back into our CSS file and I'm going to go to my menu wrap element and we're going to add a box shadow. And for the box shadow, I'll use 0 for both the horizontal and vertical offset. I'm going to use 4 pixels for the blur. And then I'm going to set the color to be a color that I'm using in my site. This is my kind of dark teal shade. I'm going to add 2 drop shadows. So I'll go ahead and add one more. Again, this is going to use 0 for the horizontal and vertical offsets. This time I'm going to use 8 pixels for the blur amount, and I'm going to use the exact same color. So this is just going to help the shadow to be a little bit more intense. And if we go ahead and save our page now and go back out to WordPress and refresh, you can see we get a slight little shadow right there. And if I go to any of my pages, it's really subtle, but it just helps to separate the content. And then the final thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make this line a little bit thinner. This particular line is being styled by default and having a 2 pixel width. I'll just copy this selector. I'm going to go into my CSS and we'll make a rule for that. And I'll set the border width to 1 pixel. And while we're here on the hero image, let's go ahead and just add a little bit of padding on the bottom too. I will go ahead and add padding on the bottom of 4 rems. Again, I need to add important. And if we save our page now and jump back into the front end part, it is going to look a little bit better. I like the way this is looking. I think this works for my website and it just creates a little bit more depth by having a partial transparency behind the menu. If you do something like this, you need to be really careful that you are using colors with enough contrast. So I think for my website, this looks fine. Let's go back to our homepage. Right now, our homepage is no longer using the default blogs. You can see that it just has content from the page, which is what I want. And now that we've done this, we will be able to leverage some of what we've built so that we can utilize these techniques on some of our other pages, and we'll be doing that next.